Welcome back to Fluent English Journey. I'm your host, Ava. If this is your first time here, welcome. This channel is a calm and friendly place where you can improve your English every single day. We do this through real-life stories, natural conversations, and easy, practical examples that you can use in your daily life. If you want to improve your listening skills, speak with more confidence, and feel more comfortable using English in real situations, you are in the right place. Today, I want to share a real-life story with you. It's a story that many people can relate to, especially those who move to a new city for work. This story is about adjusting to change, building confidence, and creating meaningful connections through language. A few years ago, I met a man named Daniel. Daniel was a software engineer. He had just moved from a small town to a big city because he got a new job. Everything around him felt new and unfamiliar. The streets were busy, the people were always in a hurry, the food was different, and even the way people spoke English felt faster and more complex. In his hometown, life was simple. Everyone knew everyone. People greeted each other, stopped to talk, and helped one another. But in the big city, things were different. Life moved quickly, and people seemed busy all the time. Daniel told me that in the beginning, he felt invisible. At work, people walked past him without much conversation. During meetings, he listened more than he spoke. He often worried about his English. He was afraid of making mistakes, and he felt nervous when meeting new colleagues. One morning, Daniel faced a small but stressful challenge. He needed to take the subway to his new office, but the route was confusing. There were many lines, many signs, and too many directions. He felt unsure and a little anxious. He noticed an older man standing nearby, reading a newspaper. After thinking for a moment, Daniel decided to be brave. He walked over and politely said, "Excuse me, sir. Could you please tell me how to get to Green Street Station?" The man looked up from his newspaper, smiled warmly, and said, "Of course. You need to take line 2 and then change trains at Central Station. Don't worry. I'll show you." That short and simple conversation changed Daniel's whole day. It made him realize something important. Confidence in English does not start with perfect grammar. It starts with courage. It starts when you speak, even if your English is not perfect. Later that week, Daniel faced another challenge. During a team meeting at work, his manager asked everyone to share one idea to improve a project. Daniel had a good idea, but he stayed quiet. He worried about his accent. He worried about making grammar mistakes. Then he remembered the man on the subway. He remembered how one small conversation made a big difference. So Daniel took a deep breath and spoke. He said, "I think we could make the process simpler by using one shared system instead of 3 separate ones." The room was quiet for a moment. Then his manager smiled and said, "That's a great idea." From that day on, Daniel slowly began to speak more in meetings. Each time he spoke, his confidence grew. He learned that people were not judging his English. They were listening to his ideas. Daniel also learned something very important. Confidence in English does not come from studying alone. It comes from using English in real life. One evening, while buying groceries, the cashier smiled and asked, "How's your day been?" Daniel smiled back and replied naturally, "Pretty good. I just finished work. How about you?" The cashier answered, "Not bad, thanks." That short conversation may seem simple, but for Daniel, it was another big step forward. Over time, Daniel made more friends at work. He became close with a coworker named Omar, who had also moved to the city for a new job. They often ate lunch together and shared stories about their families, their cultures, and their experiences learning English. One day, Omar said something that stayed in Daniel's mind. He said, "Language isn't just about words. It's about connection." And that was true. Every time you speak English, even just a few sentences, you are connecting with another person. A few months later, Daniel's wife joined him in the city. At first, she didn't speak much English. But she watched Daniel carefully. She watched how he talked to people at the market, at work, and in the park. Slowly, she started practicing too. She asked neighbors about the weather. She talked about food at the store. She smiled and said good morning to people. Within a few weeks, she felt more comfortable speaking English. Every night before going to bed, Daniel and his wife made a simple habit. They talked about their day in English. It didn't matter if they made mistakes. What mattered was practice. That daily habit helped them improve faster than they expected. Their conversations became more natural, more relaxed, and more confident. Daniel's story teaches us something powerful. Learning English through real life is one of the best ways to improve. You don't need perfect grammar or a big vocabulary to start. Start small. Order food. Ask for directions. Talk to a coworker. Every sentence you speak brings you one step closer to fluency. Let me share one more short story with you. A woman named Sarah moved to another country because of her husband's job. On her first day, she went to a local bakery. She wanted to buy bread, but she didn't know the English word for the type she wanted. Instead of staying silent, she pointed and said, "This one, please." The baker smiled and said, "Oh, you mean whole grain bread?" Sarah repeated, "Whole grain bread." And she smiled. The next day, she returned and confidently said, "Can I have one loaf of whole grain bread, please?" That is how real learning happens. Not only from books, but from daily life. English becomes easier when you use it to connect, to ask, to explain, and to share a smile. So remember this, improving your English is not about perfection. It's about communication, courage, and consistency. So the next time you have a chance to speak English, take it. Whether it's with a colleague, a neighbor, or a shopkeeper, every moment matters. Speak whenever you can. Every moment is practice, and every word you say helps build your confidence. Even a small sentence matters. Now, take a quiet moment and think about this. What real-life situation can you use today to practice English? Maybe we'll greet someone new. Maybe we'll ask a simple question in English. Maybe we'll explain something small in your own words. Whatever it is, do it with confidence. That is how real growth begins. A few weeks later, Daniel faced a new and exciting challenge. He was invited to give a short presentation at his office. It was his first time speaking in front of a group in English. He felt excited, but also very nervous. The topic of the presentation was teamwork and productivity. The night before the presentation, Daniel practiced at home in front of his wife. He spoke slowly, sometimes stopped, and sometimes repeated his sentences. His wife listened carefully and smiled. She said, "You're doing great. Just speak slowly and clearly. Remember, you know what you're talking about." The next morning, Daniel stood in front of his colleagues. His heart was beating fast, but he took a deep breath and began. "Good morning, everyone. Today, I'd like to share a few simple ways we can make teamwork more effective." His voice was calm and steady. As he continued speaking, he noticed something surprising. His teammates were nodding. Some were even taking notes. When he finished, there was a short silence. Then, the room filled with applause. His manager smiled and said, "Excellent presentation, Daniel. Very clear and well organized." That moment gave Daniel a deep sense of accomplishment. He felt proud, not because his English was perfect, but because he communicated clearly. After the meeting, a colleague named Linda walked up to him and said, "Daniel, your English has improved so much. What's your secret?" Daniel laughed softly and replied, "I just try to use English every day in real situations. I talk, I listen, and I learn from every small mistake." That evening, Daniel thought about his journey. He remembered his first week in the city, when he felt shy and unsure. He realized something important. His improvement didn't come from memorizing long vocabulary lists. It came from real conversations, daily experiences, and not giving up. A few days later, something unexpected happened. Daniel received an email from his company. They asked if he could help train new employees. Daniel felt surprised, but also proud. He accepted the offer. Soon, he started mentoring two new employees, Ally and Peter. Both were talented, but just like Daniel in the beginning, they were shy about speaking English. Daniel decided to help them in a simple way. He organized short lunchtime sessions where they could practice speaking English in a relaxed environment. During the first session, Daniel said, "Let's start simple. Tell me what you did this morning before coming to work." Ally smiled nervously and said, "I woke up early, had breakfast, and took the bus." Daniel nodded and said, "Perfect. That's exactly how we start. Simple sentences." Then Peter added, "I walked to work today because it's only 10 minutes away." Daniel smiled and encouraged them. "See? You're already communicating in English. That's success." Over the next few weeks, these lunchtime sessions became something everyone looked forward to. They talked about work, daily life, goals, and experiences. One day, Ally said, "I used to be afraid of speaking English, but now I actually enjoy it." That made Daniel smile, because he knew that feeling very well. One weekend, Daniel and his wife visited a nearby farmer's market. The market was colorful, lively, and full of friendly people. Daniel stopped at a vegetable stand and asked, "Are these carrots fresh from your farm?" The seller laughed and replied, "Yes, they were picked this morning." They talked for a few minutes about the weather, vegetables, and local food. Daniel's wife watched and said, "You've really become confident. I remember when you used to hesitate before speaking." Daniel smiled and said, "I stopped worrying about mistakes. Now I focus on communication." His wife nodded and replied, "That's the best way to learn." Later, they met an elderly woman selling handmade baskets. She asked kindly, "Would you like one for your kitchen?" Daniel's wife replied, "Yes, please. They're beautiful. Did you make them yourself?" The woman smiled proudly and said, "Yes, I did. It's my weekend hobby." That short conversation slowly turned into a long one. They talked about her life, her family, and her love for crafts. As they walked home, Daniel said, "These simple conversations teach us more English than any grammar book." His wife agreed. And they make us feel more connected to people. The following Monday, Daniel shared this story with Ally and Peter during their lunchtime session. He said, "Every time you speak English, you're not just practicing. You're connecting, learning, and growing." Peter smiled and said, "I spoke with my neighbor in English yesterday. It felt great." Ally added, "I ordered food in English for the first time." Daniel smiled and said, "That's the spirit." A few months later, the company hosted an international event. Employees from many countries came together. Daniel was chosen to help lead the event because of his strong communication skills. He worked with teams from Japan, Brazil, and Germany. Everyone used English as a common language. In that moment, Daniel realized something powerful. English was not just a skill. It was a bridge connecting people from all over the world. During a coffee break, a manager said to him, "Daniel, your English sounds so natural. How did you learn?" Daniel replied, "By living in English every day. By talking, listening, and never being afraid of mistakes." The manager smiled and said, "That's the best method." Later that night, Daniel and his wife sat quietly on their balcony. They looked at the city lights. The city that once felt strange now felt like home. And English, which once felt difficult, now flowed naturally through their lives. They spoke, they listened, and they shared their thoughts freely. English was no longer just a language for them. It had become part of their daily life, part of who they were. One quiet evening, Daniel looked at his wife and said, "I used to think English was only about words and grammar rules. But now I see it's really about connection and courage." His wife smiled and nodded. "And about enjoying the journey," she said softly. Daniel's story continued in ways he never expected. After helping Ally and Peter at work, Daniel slowly became known in the office as someone who could explain ideas clearly and help others feel comfortable speaking English. People trusted him. They felt relaxed around him. One day, his manager called him into the office and said, "Daniel, you seem to have a natural talent for helping people communicate. How would you feel about leading a short English workshop for our new employees?" At first, Daniel felt unsure. A workshop? Me, he thought. I'm not a teacher. But then he remembered his first days in the city. He remembered how nervous he was. He remembered the kind people who helped him. So, he said yes. The following week, Daniel stood in a small meeting room with 6 new employees from different countries. Everyone looked a little nervous. Daniel smiled and began, "We're not here to learn perfect grammar. We're here to learn how to speak with confidence." Everyone smiled, and the tension in the room slowly disappeared. He started with a simple exercise. "Let's introduce ourselves," he said. "Say your name, your job, and one thing you enjoy doing." A young man went first. "I'm Carlos. I'm from Spain. I like cooking." Then a woman spoke. "I'm Fatima from Egypt. I enjoy reading and walking in the park." One by one, everyone shared something small about their life. With every sentence, the room felt warmer and friendlier. Next, Daniel introduced his favorite method, storytelling. He said, "When you tell short stories, you remember words better and use them naturally." To show them, he shared a story from his own life. He talked about the time he took the wrong train when he first moved to the city. "I ended up 40 minutes away from my office," he said with a laugh. "But I met a kind man who helped me find my way back." Everyone laughed. After that, each person shared a funny or interesting story. By the end of the session, everyone was speaking more freely. Fatima smiled and said, "I used to be afraid to speak English, but this was fun." Daniel nodded. "That's the goal," he said. "English should feel like part of your life, not like a school subject." The workshop became a weekly event. Soon, people from other departments started joining too. Outside of work, Daniel continued practicing English in everyday situations. One weekend, he went to a local repair shop to fix his bicycle. The mechanic, an older man named Robert, greeted him kindly. "What seems to be the problem?" Robert asked. Daniel replied, "The chain keeps slipping off when I pedal uphill." Robert nodded. "That's an easy fix. Give me a few minutes." While waiting, Daniel started a conversation. "Do you ride bicycles often?" he asked. Robert smiled. "Every day. It keeps me active." They talked about cycling routes, city traffic, and staying healthy. When the repair was finished, Robert said, "You know, your English is very clear. Not many people take time to talk like that." Daniel laughed. "Talking is the best way to learn," he said. That evening, Daniel told the story to his wife. She smiled and said, "You're using English naturally now. It's not just practice anymore. It's part of your life." Daniel nodded. "Yes," he said, "and every new conversation still teaches me something." A few days later, something unexpected happened at work. A client from another country visited the office. The client spoke English well, but struggled with some technical words. Daniel noticed this and decided to help. He explained everything step by step, using simple language and clear examples. After the meeting, the client said, "Thank you, Daniel. You made everything easy to understand." Later, Daniel's manager said, "Your communication skills are making a real difference. Keep it up." That moment showed Daniel how far he had come. Years ago, he was the one asking for help. Now, he was helping others. He realized something important. Learning English is not only about improving yourself. It's also about helping others grow. A week later, Daniel and his wife were invited to a neighborhood gathering. People brought homemade food and shared stories. Daniel felt excited, but also a little nervous. He didn't know many people. At the door, a woman named Grace welcomed them warmly. "Welcome. What did you bring?" Daniel smiled. "We brought vegetable soup. It's one of my wife's favorites." "That sounds delicious," Grace said. "Please put it on the table." During dinner, people talked about daily life. One man mentioned how busy the city had become. Daniel joined the conversation. "Yes, I felt the same when I first moved here. It took time to adjust." The man asked, "So what helped you?" Daniel replied calmly, talking to people, learning the routes, and making small connections every day. His friendly tone made others feel comfortable. Soon, he was part of a deep conversation about city life, work, and travel. As the evening ended, a neighbor named Thomas said, "I really enjoyed talking with you. Your English sounds so natural." Daniel smiled. "You can do it too," he said. "Just speak more often and don't worry about mistakes." Thomas nodded. "I'll try that," he said. Over the next few months, Daniel and Thomas became good friends. Every Sunday morning, they walked together in the park and talked in English. They discussed news, shared ideas, and practiced storytelling. One day, Thomas said, "I used to study grammar books all the time. This is much better. I'm actually using English." Daniel smiled. Exactly. Real conversations bring the language to life. One morning during their walk, they saw a young man sitting alone on a bench. He looked confused and worried. Daniel asked gently, "Are you okay?" The man replied, "I just moved here last week. Everything feels different, and I don't know anyone." Daniel smiled warmly. "I understand that feeling. When I first came here, I felt the same." The man introduced himself as Hassan. He explained that he had studied English for years, but found it hard to use in real conversations. Daniel listened carefully, knowing that this was where his journey had once begun too. Daniel invited Hassan to join their Sunday walks in the park. The next week, Hassan came along. At first, he was very quiet. He listened more than he spoke. Daniel noticed this and gently included him in the conversation. "Hassan," he asked kindly, "what do you think about this park?" Hassan smiled shyly and said, "It's very peaceful. It reminds me of a place I used to visit in my hometown." Thomas nodded and replied, "That's nice. I like the calm feeling here too." Slowly, Hassan began to feel more comfortable. Week by week, he started sharing stories about his country, his family, and his new job. After a few weeks, his English improved noticeably. One day, Hassan said honestly, "I used to be afraid of speaking because I didn't want to make mistakes. But now I feel more relaxed." Daniel smiled and replied, "That's the secret. Confidence comes from practice, not perfection." One afternoon, Daniel's wife had a kind idea. She suggested inviting Thomas and Hassan over for dinner. "It would be nice to have everyone together," she said. They prepared a simple meal and set the table with care. When their guests arrived, the house filled with laughter and warm conversation. They talked about food, work, daily life, and cultural differences. Hassan smiled and said, "This is the first time I've had dinner with friends since moving here." "Thank you." Daniel replied warmly, "You're very welcome. We're happy you came." During dinner, Daniel shared a funny story about a time he used the wrong English word during a work meeting. Everyone laughed. Daniel said, "That's why you should never fear mistakes. They make learning fun." His wife added with a smile, "Sometimes we remember the wrong words more clearly than the right ones." Everyone laughed again. The evening ended with warm goodbyes and promises to meet again soon. The next morning, Daniel sat quietly and reflected. He realized how much English had changed his life. It wasn't just about understanding words. It was about building relationships, helping others, and feeling confident in any situation. A few days later, Daniel received an email from his company's training department. They were impressed with his communication sessions. They asked him to record short English learning videos for the company's online platform. Daniel felt excited and honored. He accepted the offer. He began recording short lessons about everyday English. He shared simple tips, real-life examples, and encouraging messages. Slowly, Daniel's Sunday English group began to grow naturally. What started as 3 people walking and talking in the park became something much bigger. One Sunday morning, when Daniel and his friends arrived at their usual spot, they noticed a few new faces waiting nearby. A woman stepped forward and said, "Hi, are you the group that practices English here? My colleague told me about you." Daniel smiled warmly. "Yes, that's us. You're very welcome to join." The woman introduced herself as Anna. She was a nurse who had recently moved to the city from Poland. "I want to feel more confident speaking English with my patients," she said. Daniel nodded. "That's a great reason to practice. We talk about everyday things, so you'll fit right in." Soon after, 2 university students named Raj and Emily joined as well. They had heard about the group through a friend. Word was spreading. As they started walking, Daniel suggested a simple topic. "Let's talk about something positive today," he said. "What's one good thing that happened to you this week?" Raj smiled and said, "I gave a presentation in English at university, and my teacher said it was excellent." Emily added, "I started volunteering at a community center. I helped children with their homework, and it felt amazing." As they walked, laughter and conversation filled the air. Everyone spoke at their own pace. Daniel made sure no one felt left out. He asked gentle questions, corrected kindly, and celebrated small successes. When Anna said, "I sometimes forget words when I talk to patients," Daniel replied, "That's completely normal. You can use simple phrases instead. For example, if you forget the word prescription, you can say the paper with your medicine details. People will understand." Anna smiled. "That's really helpful." After the walk, the group sat at a cafe near the park. Daniel shared an idea. "What if we create a small online group? We can share practice topics and ask questions during the week." Everyone agreed. Thomas offered to create a group chat. Soon, they had a small online community. People shared short stories, new vocabulary, and even voice recordings of themselves speaking English. A few weeks later, something new happened. A woman named May from China brought her husband with her. She said, "He wants to improve his English too." Daniel smiled and welcomed him. "The more, the merrier," he said. May's husband, David, was quiet at first. But after listening to others, he began to speak. "I'm an electrician," he said. "Sometimes customers speak very fast, and I don't understand everything. I want to feel more confident." Daniel replied, "That's a great goal. We can practice those conversations here." The following week, Daniel introduced a new activity. "Let's practice real-life dialogues," he said. Imagine you're talking to a customer, a doctor, or someone in a shop. Daniel acted as a customer and said, "Hello, my light switch doesn't work. Can you fix it?" David replied, "Yes, I can check it. Maybe the wire is broken." Daniel smiled and said, "Perfect. That's clear communication." Everyone clapped, and David looked proud. Each session brought new energy and confidence. Sometimes they practiced ordering food, sometimes asking for directions, sometimes talking about weekend plans. Daniel noticed that people were speaking more naturally and with less fear. One Sunday, Raj said, "I noticed I'm starting to think in English when I walk to class." Daniel smiled and replied, "That's a great sign. It means your brain is becoming comfortable with the language." As the months passed, the group became a real community. They celebrated birthdays. They shared snacks. They supported each other's goals. One day, Emily showed a small notebook. "I write one new word every day and try to use it in a sentence," she said. Daniel nodded. "That's a wonderful habit. Consistency is the key." One evening, Daniel received a message from Anna. She wrote, "Something special happened today. I spoke to a patient who was nervous about a medical test. I explained everything in English, and he said, 'Thank you. You made me feel calm.' That moment made me so happy." Daniel replied, "That's beautiful, Anna. You're not just speaking English. You're using it to help people." A few days later, Daniel and his wife were invited to dinner by their neighbor Grace, the same woman they had met at the community gathering months earlier. Daniel smiled as he read the message. He knew the journey was still continuing. Grace smiled warmly and said, "I've heard about your Sunday English group. People in the neighborhood are talking about it. You're really making a difference." Daniel smiled modestly and replied, "We're just practicing together. Everyone helps each other." Grace nodded and said, "Still, it's inspiring. You've created something meaningful." That night, after dinner, Daniel and his wife sat quietly on their balcony. The city lights glowed softly around them. "When we first moved here," his wife said, "we didn't know anyone." Daniel nodded. "And now," she continued, "we have friends from all over the world." "Yes," Daniel said softly. "And English helped make that happen. It connected us." One Sunday morning, the group met again in the park. The sky was cloudy, and soon a light rain began to fall. Daniel thought they might cancel the walk, but no one wanted to leave. Emily laughed and said, "A little rain won't stop us." They opened their umbrellas and kept walking. As they walked, they shared funny stories about misunderstandings they had experienced while learning English. Raj laughed and said, "Once I asked for a dessert instead of a dessert at a restaurant." He added, "The waiter looked at me and said, 'We don't serve sand here.'" Everyone laughed. Daniel smiled and said, "That's how you never forget the difference between those two words." Later that week, Daniel received an email from a local community center. They had heard about his English group and invited him to host a speaking workshop. Daniel agreed and named the session English in Real Life. When he arrived, the room was full. There were students, office workers, parents, and older adults. Everyone wanted to improve their communication skills. Daniel began by sharing his own story of moving to the city and learning English through daily life. Then he said, "You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be brave enough to start talking." He asked people to work in pairs and practice real-life situations, such as buying groceries or asking for help in a store. Soon, the room was full of laughter, energy, and friendly voices. People encouraged each other and tried again when they made mistakes. After the session, a young woman named Sophia came up to Daniel. She said, "I was very nervous before coming here, but now I feel more confident. I realized everyone makes mistakes." Daniel smiled and replied, "Exactly. Mistakes are part of learning. Don't hide from them. Learn from them." The workshop became a monthly event at the community center. Each time, more people joined. Daniel always shared the same message: practice through real situations, connect with others, and enjoy the process. His wife also started helping. She prepared short reading exercises about daily topics like shopping, family, and work. One evening, while walking home, Daniel and his wife stopped at a small grocery shop. The shop owner, a kind man named Mr. Khan, greeted them warmly. "Good evening, Daniel. How are you today?" "Doing well, thank you," Daniel replied. How about you? Mr. Khan smiled and said, I've been watching your English group videos online. They're very helpful for my son. He's studying English at school. Daniel was surprised. Really? I didn't know people were sharing them. Mr. Khan nodded. Yes, they're spreading around the neighborhood. Keep going. A few days later, Daniel recorded a short message for the group. He said, when I first came here, I never thought something small like a Sunday walk could grow into something this big. But it did, because everyone helped each other. Remember, every time you speak, you grow. Every conversation matters. The following Sunday, more than 20 people came to the park. Some brought snacks. Others brought notebooks. Daniel looked around and felt proud. He saw people from different countries, different ages, and different backgrounds, all connected by one goal, to speak English with confidence. He began the session by saying, let's try something new today. Each of you will share one real-life situation where you used English this week. One by one, people shared. May said, I spoke with a customer at my bakery and helped her choose a cake. Raj said, I explained my project in English to my classmates. Anna said, I comforted a patient at work. Each story showed growth, not just in language, but in courage. Daniel smiled and said, I'm proud of all of you. You're not just learning English. You're building confidence, friendship, and community. Everyone clapped, and a warm feeling filled the park. As they walked, the sun slowly broke through the clouds. Daniel thought about how much had changed. The language that once made him feel small now gave him strength and purpose. The group was more than practice. It was proof that learning grows best when it's shared. One morning, I went to a small cafe near my apartment to get breakfast. It was busy and people were waiting in line. At the counter, a man looked embarrassed. He quietly told the cashier he had forgotten his wallet. Without thinking too much, I stepped forward and paid for his meal. He looked at me with surprise and gratitude. Later, we sat together and talked. His name was David. He was a teacher who had just moved to the city. That small act of kindness turned into a new friendship. A few days later, I met David again at the same cafe. He smiled and said, that day changed my whole morning. I was stressed, but your kindness made me feel welcome. He added, sometimes we don't need to do something big to make a difference. A small gesture can bring light into someone's day. That moment reminded me of something important. A simple smile, a kind word, or a small action can change more than we realize. One weekend, I went on a short trip to a nearby village with my family. The air was fresh, the fields were green, and life felt calm. We stayed with an older couple, Mr. and Mrs. Brown, who ran a small farm. They showed us how to milk cows and bake fresh bread. I still remember the smell of that bread, warm, soft, and comforting. That weekend taught me the value of simple living. When I returned to the city, everything felt different. People were rushing, checking their phones, and worrying about time. In the village, life moved slowly. People enjoyed small moments. It reminded me how important it is to slow down and appreciate what we already have: fresh air, family, and peaceful mornings. Sometimes, we get so busy chasing success that we forget to enjoy life. If you ever get the chance, take a short trip away from the city. It helps you see life and learning from a different angle. Another story I would like to share happened a few years ago when I was traveling for work. My flight was delayed for several hours. The airport was crowded, and everyone looked tired and frustrated. People were checking their phones again and again, sighing and complaining quietly. Instead of feeling angry, I decided to start a conversation with the man sitting next to me. His name was Ahmed. He told me he was traveling to see his wife and children after being away for work for many months. We talked about our jobs, our families, and our travel experiences. Slowly, the long delay didn't feel so heavy anymore. We shared snacks, laughed, and told stories. By the time the flight was ready, what started as a boring wait had turned into a meaningful connection. That moment taught me something important. Any situation can become positive if we approach it with the right attitude. One of my favorite memories happened on a rainy day. It was one of those days when everything went wrong. I missed the bus. I spilled coffee on my shirt. And of course, I forgot my umbrella. I stood under a small shop roof, feeling frustrated and wet. Then a woman named Sarah, who was also waiting there, started talking to me. We laughed about the weather and how unpredictable life can be. Soon, the rain slowed down and we walked together to the bus stop. That simple conversation turned a bad day into a good one. It reminded me that attitude changes everything. Sometimes inspiration comes from the most unexpected places. Once, I met a taxi driver named Paul. During our ride, he shared something that stayed with me forever. He said, "Every morning, I say 3 things I'm thankful for. It keeps my mind positive no matter what happens." That small habit made a big impression on me. From that day, I also started writing down things I'm thankful for each morning. Sometimes it's something simple, good weather, a warm cup of tea, or a kind conversation. Gratitude changes how we see life. It helps us focus on what we have, not on what we don't. Speaking of daily habits, I've noticed something important. How we start our day often decides how the rest of the day feels. If you begin your morning in a rush, the whole day feels stressful. But if you take a few minutes to breathe, stretch, and plan calmly, everything feels smoother. I remember one morning when I woke up late and skipped breakfast to attend a meeting. I felt tired, hungry, and distracted all day. After that, I promised myself never to skip breakfast again. A good morning routine doesn't have to be complicated. It just needs to help you feel ready. Another lesson came from my friend Daniel, who owns a small bakery. He once said something I will never forget. Success doesn't come from doing big things once. It comes from doing small things every day. Daniel wakes up at 4 a.m. to bake bread. He greets every customer with a smile, even when he's tired. His bakery isn't fancy, but people love it because of the warmth they feel inside. His story reminds me that consistency is more powerful than speed. If you want to learn English, improve your career, or build a habit, just do a little every day. One day, I met an artist named Miguel in a park. He was painting beautiful landscapes. I asked him how he stayed motivated. He said, "I paint every day, even when I don't feel like it. Some days are good, some are not. What matters is showing up." That sentence stayed with me. You don't have to be perfect. You just need to keep going. This is true whether you are learning English, exercising, or chasing a dream. Showing up daily builds confidence and strength. I also remember when I was learning public speaking. I used to feel very nervous. My hands would shake and I would forget my words. So I joined a small speaking club. At first, I made many mistakes. My voice was weak and my sentences were unclear. But I didn't quit. After months of practice, I improved. One day, I gave a short speech, and people clapped with real appreciation. That moment showed me how far I had come. Learning takes time, but patience always brings results. There was also a time when I failed. I started a small project that didn't work as planned. I felt disappointed and almost gave up. Later, I realized something important. Failure is not the opposite of success. It is part of it. Thomas Edison failed many times before inventing the light bulb. When asked about it, he said, "I didn't fail. I just found 10,000 ways that didn't work." That mindset changed my thinking. Now, when things go wrong, I see them as lessons, not losses. One of the most inspiring people I've met was a woman named Aisha. She started a small tailoring business after leaving her job. At first, it was very difficult. She worked late nights sewing clothes at home, but she believed in her dream. Slowly, more customers came. Today, she owns her own shop and even trains young people. Her story reminds us that big dreams always begin with small steps. Sometimes real life teaches lessons no book can. Once, in a coastal town, I met fishermen who woke up before sunrise every day. They worked hard against wind and waves, yet they always smiled. I asked one of them, "How do you stay positive despite the challenges?" He replied, "Because the sea feeds us. If we focus only on what's hard, we forget what's beautiful." That sentence stayed in my heart. It showed me that happiness comes from gratitude and perspective. Another powerful moment came when I attended a community event in my neighborhood. People from many different countries came together. They brought food from their cultures, shared stories, and celebrated as one group. During the event, I met a man from Kenya. He smiled and said something I will never forget. "We may come from different places, but kindness speaks one language." That sentence touched my heart deeply. It made me realize that kindness is universal. You don't need perfect English. You don't need a lot of money. Sometimes a simple smile or a sincere "thank you" is enough to make someone feel seen and valued. One morning, while walking in the park, I saw an older man feeding birds. I watched him for a while and then asked, "Why do you do this every day?" He smiled softly and said, "It makes me feel alive." That answer felt beautiful and meaningful. When you give something to the world, even something small, you feel connected to it. Giving doesn't always mean money. It can be time. It can be care. It can be attention. When you listen to someone's story or help them with a small task, you make the world a little better. These are the lessons that stay with you forever. A few weeks later, I started thinking more deeply about kindness and giving. So I decided to volunteer at a local food center one Saturday. It was a small place where people from the neighborhood came to receive meals and groceries. When I arrived, the coordinator, Mrs. Parker, greeted me warmly and showed me what to do. I helped pack food bags and handed them to visitors. At first, I thought I was only helping others. But as the day went on, I realized something important. I was learning gratitude. Seeing people smile and say "thank you" for something simple touched my heart. It reminded me that giving time is just as valuable as giving money. Later that afternoon, an elderly man named Mr. Lewis came to collect a food bag. He told me that he used to be a teacher but faced difficulties after retiring. We talked for a few minutes, and he shared stories from his teaching days. Before leaving, he looked at me and said, "Never stop being kind, young man. It keeps the world alive." Those words stayed with me. They reminded me that kindness is powerful, not just for others, but for our own hearts too. The next week, something interesting happened at work. One of my colleagues, Anna, looked very stressed. She had an important presentation coming up and felt unsure about herself. I remembered how nervous I used to feel when speaking in public, so I offered to help her practice. We spent an hour reviewing her slides and practicing together. Slowly, her confidence grew. The next day, she gave her presentation beautifully. Afterward, she thanked me and said, "I almost gave up, but your encouragement helped me stay calm." That moment reminded me that support and understanding can change someone's confidence. Another day, while walking home, I saw a small crowd near a street corner. A delivery man's bicycle had broken down. He looked frustrated because he couldn't carry all the boxes. I walked over and helped him carry a few boxes to the nearby shop. He smiled with relief and said, "You really saved me today." On my way home, I thought about how small acts can create a positive chain. When one person helps another, it often inspires kindness to continue. That night, I reflected on how busy life can be. We rush through days filled with work, calls, and deadlines. But when we pause to connect with others, even for a few minutes, we find meaning. Learning English, working hard, and reaching goals are important. But what truly makes life rich is how we treat the people around us. A few months ago, I had another experience that taught me patience. My car broke down while I was traveling to visit my parents. I was stuck on the side of a quiet road. At first, I felt frustrated. Then I noticed the sunset. The sky was full of orange and purple colors. I decided to take a short walk while waiting. After a few minutes, a man stopped his car and asked if I needed help. His name was John, and he worked as a mechanic. He fixed my car quickly and refused to take any payment. He smiled and said, "Someone once helped me when I needed it. I'm just passing it on." That moment reminded me of the circle of kindness. What we give often returns in unexpected ways. Another meaningful lesson came while I was teaching an English class for beginners. One student, Maria, always struggled with speaking. She often said, "I understand everything, but I'm scared to talk." I told her it's okay to make mistakes. Every mistake means you're trying. I asked her to speak just one full sentence each day. Slowly, she improved. After a few weeks, she spoke for 2 full minutes without stopping. The class clapped, and she smiled proudly. That day taught me that growth doesn't happen overnight. It comes one small step at a time. Once, I visited my friend Omar, who owns a small farm outside the city. He and his wife live a quiet life, growing vegetables and caring for animals. When I asked how he manages everything, he said, "We do a little every day, and that's enough." I helped him feed the chickens and water the plants. I noticed that he never rushed. He worked slowly with care. That day taught me that patience improves everything. Whether you are studying English or cooking dinner, calm effort brings better results. A few weeks later, I went hiking with friends in the countryside. The weather was pleasant, and trees surrounded the path. During the walk, my friend Henry shared a lesson from his father. He said his father once told him, "Don't look at how far you still have to go. Look at how far you've already come." That advice changed his life. Now he focuses on progress, not perfection. This lesson is powerful for language learning too. If you learned even one new word today, that is progress worth celebrating. One of the most meaningful lessons I learned was about honesty. Once, at a small market, a shopkeeper gave me too much change. It wasn't a large amount, but I returned it. The shopkeeper looked surprised and grateful. He said, "You could have walked away, but you didn't." That moment made me feel proud, not because of the money, but because I did the right thing. Honesty builds trust and self-respect. Another day, I met a young delivery worker named Samir. He was carrying a heavy package up several flights of stairs. I helped him with the last steps. At the top, he smiled and said, "People rarely stop to help, but it means a lot when someone does." We talked briefly, and he shared his dream of starting a small business for his family. Moments like these remind me of one simple truth: kindness, patience, and consistency quietly shape a meaningful life. His story reminded me of something very important. Every person we meet is carrying their own struggles, dreams, and hopes. When we truly listen to others with empathy, the world feels warmer and more connected. Not long after that, I had a conversation with my father that changed how I think about life. We were sitting in the garden, quietly drinking tea. The air was calm, and the moment felt peaceful. My father looked at me and said, "Ava, success is not measured by how much you have. It is measured by how much peace you feel at the end of the day." I thought deeply about his words. True success is not about money, power, or fame. It is about being content, living honestly, and staying kind. Those simple words from my father still guide me every day. I remember another moment when I had to make a difficult decision. I received 2 job offers. One job paid more money, but it required long hours and less time with my family. The other job paid less, but it allowed me to spend more time at home. I chose the second job. At first, I was unsure. I wondered if I had made the right choice. But over time, I realized something important. That decision gave me balance and happiness. I could visit my parents. I could spend evenings with my wife. I could enjoy my work without feeling exhausted. That experience taught me that peace and time with loved ones are priceless. Another powerful lesson came from one of my students, Hassan. He came to class every day, even when he was very tired from working long hours. One evening, I asked him, "What keeps you motivated?" He smiled and said, "I promise my son that I will learn English so I can help him study." His answer touched my heart deeply. It showed me the power of purpose. When you have a strong reason to learn or improve, nothing can stop you. Once, during a trip abroad, I got lost in a city where I didn't speak the local language well. I was trying to find my hotel, but I couldn't understand the signs. A local man noticed my confusion and came over to help. He didn't speak English either, but through hand gestures, smiles, and patience, he guided me to my destination. That moment taught me something beautiful. Kindness doesn't always need words. Communication is not only about speaking perfectly. It is about connection, understanding, and patience. Another real-life story that stays close to my heart is about a woman named Clara. She runs a small community library. She started it using her own savings because she wanted children to have a place to read and learn. Every day, she opens the doors, organizes books, and welcomes students with a smile. She once told me, "Education is the key to freedom, and I want every child to have it." Her dedication deeply inspired me. A few days later, I visited an old friend named Robert, who works as a firefighter. His job is dangerous, but he speaks about it with pride. While we were sitting in his backyard, I asked him, "What keeps you motivated to face danger every day?" He replied, "It's not about being brave all the time. It's about doing what's right, even when you're scared." That sentence stayed with me. Courage does not mean feeling no fear. It means moving forward even when fear is present. Robert shared a story about a fire he fought last year. An old man was trapped inside his house. Robert managed to rescue him just before the roof collapsed. Afterward, the man hugged him tightly and cried with relief. Robert said that moment reminded him why he chose this job, to protect and serve others. Listening to him made me realize something important. Every job, when done with honesty and purpose, can make a difference. You don't need to be famous or rich to change lives. You only need a good heart and a sense of responsibility. A week later, I had lunch with my friend Emma, who works as a nurse. She told me that on the busiest days, when patients feel scared and tired, she always tries to be kind. She said, "People may forget my name, but they remember how I made them feel." That idea felt powerful. It is true in every part of life. People may forget our words, but they will remember our attitude. That same week, I met an older gentleman named George at a train station. He was traveling to visit his grandchildren. We sat together and talked for a while. He shared stories about building his own house, meeting his wife, and raising his children with simple values. Before leaving, he said, "The best things in life are not things. They are people, memories, and moments." That sentence stayed in my mind. It reminded me that true happiness comes from appreciating what we already have, not chasing what we don't. Another lesson came on a quiet Sunday morning at a local market. I stopped at a fruit stall run by a cheerful woman named Laura. She asked how my day was going, and we began talking about life. She told me she wakes up at 4 a.m. every day to bring fresh produce to the market. When I asked how she stays positive, she smiled and said, "Because I love seeing people leave my stall smiling." Her words reminded me that joy often comes from giving joy to others. Later that day, I met my neighbor Tom while taking out the trash. He shared that his son had just started his first job. He looked proud and emotional and said, "Time goes so fast." I still remember teaching him how to ride a bicycle. His words made me reflect on how quickly life moves. It reminded me to treasure the present moment. Happiness is often not in the future. It is right now in small daily moments. A few days later, I went for a morning jog in the park. I saw a man practicing yoga under a tree. His name was Peter. He told me he used to feel anxious all the time. A doctor once advised him to try meditation and breathing exercises. He said it changed his life. I tried it myself, sitting quietly for just 10 minutes each morning. It helped me feel calmer and more focused. Small habits can create big changes. One last story that touched my heart came from my friend Alice. She was struggling to balance work and family life. One day, her young daughter looked at her and said, "Mom, you're my superhero." That single sentence gave her strength to keep going. Sometimes others see our strength before we do. There was also a time when I learned an important lesson about forgiveness. My colleague Mark made a serious mistake at work that affected my project. At first, I felt upset. But when we talked, he sincerely apologized and explained everything. In that moment, I realized that forgiveness brings peace, not weakness. I could see that Mark felt truly sorry for what happened. So, I decided to forgive him and move forward. Later, something interesting happened. Mark helped me with another project, and he did an excellent job. That experience taught me an important lesson. Forgiving others is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of strength. When we hold on to anger, it only hurts us. But when we let go, we make space for peace. One cold winter morning, something small but beautiful happened. I was walking to work when I saw a young boy helping his mother carry heavy bags. The boy looked very young, maybe around 10 years old. But he was trying his best to help. I walked over and offered to carry one of the bags. The mother smiled and said, "It's rare to see people stop and help these days." As I walked away, I thought about something important. Children learn values by watching adults. When we act kindly, children see it. And when they see kindness, they grow up wanting to do the same. A few days later, I joined a small community cleanup event. We were picking up litter in a nearby park. There, I met a university student named David. He told me he joined the event because he wanted to give back to his neighborhood. He said, "It feels good to do something useful, even if it's small." That day, as we worked together, I realized something powerful. Big change happens when many people do small things. If everyone helps a little, cleans a little, and cares a little, the world becomes a much better place. Another story I often remember is about a man named Henry. He owned a small bookstore. The shop was old, quiet, and full of character. One afternoon, I went there to buy a notebook. Henry told me he had been running the bookstore for over 30 years. I asked him how he managed to keep the shop open when big online stores were everywhere. He smiled and said, "Because every person who walks in here is not just a customer. They're a story." That answer touched my heart. It reminded me that human connection is more important than technology. No matter how much the world changes, nothing can replace real conversation and kindness. One evening, while returning home, I saw a young couple beside their car. They were struggling to fix a flat tire. The husband was trying to loosen the bolts, but the wrench kept slipping. I stopped and offered to help. We worked together for about 10 minutes, and finally, the tire was fixed. They thanked me with big smiles. As I drove away, I thought about how simple actions build trust between strangers. You never know when a small act of help can mean a lot to someone. Another experience that changed how I think happened when I joined a local reading club. Every week, people of all ages came together to talk about books and ideas. There was an older woman named Margaret. She always shared thoughtful thoughts. One evening, she said something I will never forget. Every person you meet knows something you don't. Listen and learn. That simple sentence reminded me to stay humble. Everyone has something valuable to teach us. One morning, I was sitting in a coffee shop reading quietly. Suddenly, a man near me dropped his wallet and didn't notice. I picked it up and called after him. When he turned around, his face showed great relief. He said, "You just saved my day." He offered to buy me a coffee, but I politely refused. I walked out smiling because doing the right thing brings a special kind of happiness. Honesty and awareness make the world safer for everyone. Another day, I visited a local library. I noticed a young boy sitting alone, reading very carefully. I asked him what he was reading. He smiled and said, "It's about explorers. I want to travel one day too." His excitement made me smile. It reminded me that dreams begin when we are young. When adults encourage children, we help their dreams grow stronger. That's why supporting curiosity and imagination is so important. One last story I want to share happened on a rainy evening. I was walking home when I saw an elderly woman standing at a bus stop. She was holding heavy bags. The rain was strong and the bus was late. I offered to share my umbrella and waited with her. We started talking. Her name was Grace. She told me she lived alone, but she loved talking to people. She said, "You never know how much a small conversation can brighten someone's day." As I walked home that night, I realized she was right. Sometimes, being present and kind is enough to make a difference. Last time, we talked about lessons from simple moments in life. Today, we continue with new stories that help you think in English naturally. These stories are about real life. They teach meaning, confidence, and calm communication. I once met a man named George who worked as a delivery driver. Every day, he drove long hours delivering packages across the city. One day, during heavy rain, his van broke down on a busy road. Cars honked. People shouted. Water filled the street. George felt frustrated. But instead of getting angry, he took a deep breath and said, "This is just another challenge." He called for help. He guided traffic safely. He even helped another driver push a stalled car to the side. Later, he told me something important. Staying calm helped him think clearly and act wisely. That moment taught me a lesson. Calmness is not weakness. It is strength under pressure. A few months later, I met Emma, a teacher who moved from a small town to a big city. Her first week was full of surprises. She got lost many times. She missed her train more than once. But she never gave up. She said, "Every time I get lost, I discover a new street, a new cafe, or a new shortcut." What a beautiful way to see mistakes. She didn't see them as problems. She saw them as discoveries. That lesson is perfect for learning English too. Mistakes are not failures. They are steps toward understanding. Now, let me share a story from my own life. A few years ago, I joined a community event where we cleaned a local park. The park was full of trash. There were plastic bottles on the ground and dry leaves everywhere. At first, everyone worked quietly. People were picking up trash and putting it into bags. Then something nice happened. One man started telling jokes and funny stories. Soon, people began to laugh. The work felt lighter and time passed quickly. That moment taught me something important. Teamwork is not only about working together. It is also about sharing good energy. When you learn English with others, try to bring positivity. Smile. Laugh. Share ideas. Enjoy the learning process together. Let me tell you another story. Sarah is a nurse who works night shifts. Her job is difficult, and her days are long and stressful. One night, she was very tired. Her body hurt, and her mind felt heavy. Then an elderly patient looked at her and smiled. He said, "Thank you for taking care of me." Those simple words changed her night. They gave her energy to continue working. This story reminds us that words are powerful. In English or any language, kind words matter. A simple sentence can brighten someone's day. Remember this when you speak English. Kindness does not need perfect grammar. It only needs sincerity. Now let me share the story of Daniel. Daniel owns a small bakery. One morning, just before opening, his oven stopped working. He couldn't bake fresh bread. Customers were already waiting outside. Daniel could have closed the shop. He could have given up. But instead, he chose kindness. He gave away leftover bread for free. He served coffee to people while they waited. People appreciated his honesty and calm attitude. They respected how he handled a difficult moment. Within 1 week, his bakery became even more popular. Not because everything went well, but because he handled a problem with grace. Sometimes, a good reputation grows from challenges, not from success. Another experience I remember happened while traveling in another country. I didn't understand the local language very well. I felt nervous ordering food or asking for directions. Then I met a taxi driver named Paul. He helped me patiently. He used simple words. He used hand gestures. And he smiled. He didn't laugh at my mistakes. He didn't rush me. From that moment, I learned something important. Communication is not about speaking perfectly. It is about understanding, patience, and connection. The same rule applies when you speak English. It's okay to pause. It's okay to search for words. It's okay to speak slowly. The goal is connection, not perfection. Let me share another example. I once attended a small community gathering. People stood up and shared personal stories. One man named Mark talked about losing his job. Instead of complaining, he said something surprising. He said, "Losing my job gave me time to find my real passion." That passion was gardening. Now, Mark runs a small business growing organic vegetables. His story reminded me that life sometimes changes our path for a reason. When you face difficulty, it may be life saying, "Try something new." Speaking of change, let me tell you about Alice. Alice is a mother of 2. She decided to learn English in her 40s. At first, she felt afraid. She thought it was too late. But she practiced every day, sometimes only for 15 minutes. She watched short English videos. She repeated simple phrases. She wrote new words in a small notebook. After 1 year, she could speak confidently. She could hold full conversations. She said the secret was not talent. It was consistency. Learning English is not about speed. It is about steady effort. Then there is Tom. Tom is a farmer from a small village. He had never used a computer before. His son helped him sell vegetables online. At first, Tom was afraid to type in English. He made mistakes. But he kept practicing. Slowly, he improved. His business grew. He even made friends from other countries. Tom's story shows us something powerful. English is not just a language. It is a bridge. It connects people, ideas, and opportunities. I also remember a bus driver named Henry. Every morning, Henry greeted passengers cheerfully. He used simple English phrases like, "Good morning" and "Have a nice day." Once, a tourist told him that his greeting made her happy. Henry smiled and said, "It costs nothing to be kind." That lesson stayed with me. English is not about big words. It's about warm words. Another story I want to share is about James and his wife, Laura. They lost their office jobs and decided to open a small restaurant. At first, they were nervous about speaking English with customers. So they practiced together every day. They wrote down polite sentences like, "How can I help you? Would you like to try our special dish?" With time, their confidence grew. Their restaurant became popular in their town. Practice turned fear into confidence. Before we continue, let me share one more short story. One day, I was walking through a market. I saw a small boy selling handmade keychains. He looked about 10 years old. I asked him, "How long have you been making these?" He answered proudly, "Since I learned to tie a knot." His words were simple, but full of pride. They made me smile. That moment reminded me that every skill starts small. With patience and effort, it can grow into something valuable. Everyday people teach us powerful lessons. About language. About life. English is not only in textbooks. It lives in moments, emotions, and real conversations. When we listen to stories, we learn tone, rhythm, and natural expression. This is how listening improves naturally. When I think of George's calmness, Emma's courage, Sarah's kindness, Daniel's honesty, and Alice's dedication, I see one common theme: patience and positive thinking. These are life lessons. But they're also communication lessons. In English, emotion matters as much as words. When you comfort someone, tone matters more than grammar. Saying, "It's okay, you'll be fine," in a soft voice can bring comfort, even if your English is not perfect. That is the beauty of language. It connects hearts before words. When you listen to English, don't worry about understanding every word. Listen for feeling. Listen for meaning. Listening is not just about ears. It is about empathy. One of my favorite learning moments came while volunteering at a hospital. Many patients didn't speak English, but kind eyes, gentle gestures, and quiet presence said everything. I slowly realized something very important. Language does not start with grammar or vocabulary. Language starts with intention. It starts with the desire to connect with another person. When you truly want to connect, you will always find a way to express yourself, even if your English is not perfect. So, as you continue listening today, try to imagine yourself inside these stories. Think about how you would feel. Think about what you would say. Think about which English words you could use. This is how learning becomes real. This is how English becomes part of your life. A few weeks later, I had another experience. This one taught me about patience and communication. I met a man named Victor. He owns a small bookstore downtown. Victor has been running his shop for more than 20 years. Most of his customers are regular visitors. They come not only to buy books, but also to talk, share ideas, and enjoy conversation. One afternoon, a young tourist walked into the store. He looked confused and a little nervous. He did not speak English well. He was trying to ask about travel guidebooks. Victor smiled warmly. He spoke slowly and clearly. He pointed to the correct books. He used simple words and calm gestures. In the end, the tourist thanked him and left with a big smile. Later, Victor said something I still remember. He said, "Communication is more about clarity and patience than perfect words." That sentence stayed with me. Learning English is not about knowing every word. It is about being understood. And it is about understanding others. Another story comes from my friend Lucas. Lucas is a gardener who works in a large park. He loves early mornings. He told me the park feels peaceful and quiet at that time. One morning, while trimming bushes, he saw a small child chasing butterflies. The child stopped and asked, "Why are you trimming the bushes?" Lucas answered simply, "To help the plants grow healthy." The child thought for a moment and said, "I want to help too." Lucas smiled and invited the child to water the flowers. He showed him how to do it gently. That day, the child learned about nature. And Lucas reminded me of something important. Teaching can happen anywhere. Even small moments can become learning moments. When you explain something in English, you learn too. Teaching a simple word or explaining a small idea builds confidence and vocabulary. I also want to share a story about my friend Philip. Philip works as a bus driver. One morning, a woman got on his bus. She was carrying a heavy bag and holding a small child. The child dropped a toy. It rolled under the seat. Philip stopped the bus safely. He picked up the toy and gave it back to the child. The woman thanked him sincerely. Later, she said, "Small acts of kindness make stressful days easier." Philip smiled and replied, "It's not a big deal, but it matters." That moment taught me something valuable. Attention, empathy, and awareness are just as important as words. One day, I visited my friend Richard. Richard owns a small cafe. He told me many people come in feeling tired or stressed. So he always greets them with a smile. He asks about their day. He listens carefully. Sometimes he notices someone is upset. He offers a kind word or a free coffee. Richard said, "It's amazing how a small gesture can change someone's mood." That made me think about English learning. Encouraging words matter. Friendly sentences create connection. They motivate people to keep going. Another experience happened at a community workshop. I met a man named Simon. He was learning woodworking. At first, Simon was very shy. He was afraid to make mistakes. He said, "I'm scared I'll do something wrong." The instructor smiled and said, "Mistakes are part of learning." Slowly, Simon improved. One day, he made a small wooden chair. It was not perfect, but he was proud. His confidence grew. Soon, he was helping another beginner. That story reminds us of something important. Learning is a process. Mistakes mean effort. Effort builds confidence. A few months ago, my wife and I went on a short trip. On the way, our car had a flat tire. While I was fixing it, a man named Michael stopped to help. He did not have to stop, but he did. He shared his tools. He helped guide us to a nearby garage. That small act made our day easier. It reminded me that people are often willing to help. Sometimes, we just need to accept help with gratitude. In English learning, it is the same. Ask questions. Ask for help. Ask for clarification. There is no shame in trying. I also want to share a story about a student named Kevin. Kevin struggled with speaking English at first. Every time he tried, he felt nervous. I told him to start small. Simple sentences. Daily life sentences. I wake up at 7. I like drinking coffee in the morning. He practiced every day. Slowly, his confidence grew. One day, he said, "I feel confident now. I can tell my story in English." That moment reminded me of something important. Learning English is not about perfection. It is about courage and progress. Another story I remember is about an older man named Thomas. Thomas worked at a small post office. He helped people fill out forms. Many of them struggled. He always spoke slowly. He explained everything clearly. One day, a young man came in frustrated. He didn't understand the form. Thomas calmly helped him step by step. When the young man finished, he smiled and said, "Thank you. I understand now." Thomas replied, "Patience makes everything easier." That is a powerful lesson. Patience helps you learn. Patience helps you speak. Patience helps you understand others. A few weeks later, my wife and I visited a hospital. We met a nurse named Olivia. She was very busy, but she treated every patient with care. One day, she spent extra time with a scared child. She spoke gently. She explained slowly. The child smiled in the end. Olivia said, "That smile makes all the stress worth it." Her dedication reminded me of something important. Clear communication, empathy, and attention can change moments, even small ones. In English, learning how to comfort, encourage, and speak kindly is just as valuable as learning new words. Another meaningful experience happened in a cafe that I often visit. One day, I met a man named Brian. He was sitting quietly and reading a thick book in English. I became curious and asked him, "What are you reading?" He smiled and said, "I want to improve my English and learn new ideas." We started talking about the book. We shared our thoughts, opinions, and feelings. We talked for almost half an hour. That simple conversation taught me something important. Practicing English with other people, even strangers, is very powerful. Real conversations help you grow faster than memorizing words. When you speak naturally, your confidence grows. One afternoon, I went to a park with my camera to watch birds. While I was taking photos, I met a young boy named Alex. He was also interested in birds. He didn't speak much English, but he pointed at a bird and asked, "What is this called?" I told him the name of the bird. He repeated the word slowly and carefully. A little later, he asked more questions. Soon, he was using full sentences. That moment reminded me of something important. Curiosity helps learning grow naturally. When you ask questions and stay interested, your English improves without pressure. I also want to share a story about my friend William. William started a small fitness class in his neighborhood. At first, only a few people joined. But William stayed positive and encouraging. One student said, "I don't know if I can keep up." William smiled and replied, "Start where you are. Every step counts." Slowly, everyone became stronger. The class grew bigger and better. That story reminds me of learning English. Encouragement, patience, and consistency matter. Step by step, day by day, progress happens. Another story comes from my wife, Anna. She volunteers at a local library every weekend. She helps children read English books. Some children struggle with pronunciation. One boy became frustrated because he couldn't say a word correctly. Anna showed him slowly. She repeated the word gently. She praised his effort, not just the result. The boy smiled with joy. Anna later said, "Teaching is not about perfection. It's about patience and encouragement." That lesson is important for every learner. We all need support. We all grow better with kindness. I also met a man named Richard at a seminar. He works in customer service. He told me that listening is the most important part of his job. One day, a customer came in angry and spoke very fast. Richard did not interrupt. He listened carefully. Then he repeated the problem calmly and offered a clear solution. The customer left satisfied. That story reminded me that listening is a skill in English. Don't just hear words. Listen to meaning, tone, and emotion. A few days later, my wife and I visited a small village. We stayed at a guest house run by a kind couple named Sam and Linda. They welcomed us warmly and served homemade breakfast. During breakfast, we talked about family and travel. They spoke slowly and clearly. That made understanding easy and comfortable. That moment reminded me that clear and kind English helps everyone learn better. Another simple moment happened in a supermarket. I saw an elderly man trying to reach something on a high shelf. He looked uncomfortable. I offered to help him. He smiled with relief. We talked briefly while I handed him the items. Before leaving, he said, "Thank you for stopping to help me." That short moment reminded me that kindness stays in memory. English can be used anywhere, even in small daily moments. One morning, I went for a walk with my dog. I met a young woman named Jessica. She was walking her dog too. We started talking about pets and daily habits. She told me she is learning English to talk with international colleagues. We practiced simple questions and answers. It felt natural and relaxed. That day reminded me that English grows best in daily life, not only from textbooks. A few weeks later, I had another experience. This one taught me about observation and learning. I was sitting in a small neighborhood cafe. I noticed a man named Daniel struggling to take notes while drinking coffee. I asked if I could help. He explained that he was preparing a speech for a community event. I offered to read his notes aloud. He listened carefully and corrected some words. By the end, he felt more confident. That day reminded me that English learning often happens through shared moments. Listening and speaking together make learning stronger. Another memorable moment happened at a local farmer's market. I met a woman named Linda who sells homemade jam. She told me she started her business to support her family. A customer asked how she made one type of jam. Linda explained step by step in simple English. She showed the ingredients. The customer tried to repeat the steps. They both laughed when the customer mixed up a word. Later, Linda said, "It's fun when people learn something new with me." That story reminded me that learning feels easier with humor and sharing. Teaching and learning often happen naturally. I also remember meeting a man named Thomas at a bus stop. He was reading an English newspaper. He was trying to understand a business article. We talked briefly about the topic. That short conversation reminded me that every place can become a classroom. English is not just a subject. It is part of real life. I asked him if he needed help with any English words. He smiled and said yes. So we sat together and read a few paragraphs slowly. We talked about the meaning of phrases and expressions. I explained the ideas in simple words. By the end, he understood the main points. He thanked me warmly. That day, I learned something important. When you help someone understand English, even in a small way, your own confidence becomes stronger. Teaching and helping others also improves your own skills. A few days later, I visited my friend Anthony. He runs a small bicycle repair shop. That day, a young boy came into the shop. His bike chain was broken. He looked worried and unsure. Anthony did not rush. He spoke calmly and explained how to fix the chain. Step by step, he showed the boy what to do. He encouraged the boy to try it himself. Slowly, the boy fixed the chain. When it worked, the boy smiled with pride. Anthony later told me, when you guide someone patiently, they learn faster and feel proud. That lesson fits perfectly with learning English. When someone tries to speak or practice English, patience and encouragement help them improve quickly. Another story comes from my friend Olivia. She works as a volunteer at a local shelter. One day, she helped a man named Peter. Peter struggled with English and needed help filling out forms. Olivia spoke slowly and clearly. She guided him through each step. She did not rush him. Later, Peter told her, "I feel more confident now. I understand better." That moment reminded me of something important. Real-life experiences teach practical English. Helping someone complete a task is often better than studying grammar alone. One afternoon, while walking in the park, I saw a group of children playing soccer. They were arguing about the rules. I went over and asked if I could help. They agreed. I suggested taking turns. I explained the rules clearly in simple English. Soon, the game started again. Everyone was happy. The children practiced speaking English naturally while playing. That moment showed me that learning can be fun. You don't always need books or classrooms. Sometimes learning happens through play and interaction. A few weeks later, I visited a small library. My friend Rachel works there. She was helping a young girl named Emily. Emily wanted to read an English storybook, but she struggled with pronunciation. Rachel stayed patient. She broke the words into smaller sounds. She encouraged Emily to read aloud. Slowly, Emily improved. When she finished the story, her face lit up. Rachel smiled and said, "Confidence grows when someone takes the time to guide you." That sentence stayed with me. Language learning needs patience, encouragement, and step-by-step practice. Another experience involved a man named Andrew. He runs a small tech support business. One day, a customer called him feeling frustrated. Their computer was not working. Andrew listened carefully. He did not interrupt. He spoke calmly and explained each step clearly. He made sure the customer could follow along. By the end of the call, the problem was solved. The customer thanked him sincerely. That experience reminded me of something important. Listening carefully and explaining clearly are just as important as speaking fluently. I also remember visiting my friend Jessica. She teaches young children. One day, a child asked her, "How do you say butterfly in English?" Jessica showed a picture. She said the word slowly. The child repeated it again and again. After a few tries, the child said it correctly. Jessica smiled and said, "Every small success matters." That moment reminded me that repetition is powerful. Small efforts lead to big improvement. A week later, I met a man named Brian at a coffee shop. He was reading an English travel magazine. Some phrases confused him. I offered to help. We talked about the sentences together. We discussed meaning and pronunciation. By the end, Brian felt more confident. He believed he could read English on his own. That day, I realized something simple but powerful. Curiosity and asking questions naturally improve listening and understanding. Another story comes from my friend William. He owns a small grocery store. One day, a customer came in feeling confused about prices. William explained everything calmly. He used simple English. He repeated information when needed. The customer understood and left satisfied. William later said, "Clarity and patience make communication effective." That reminded me of English learning. Repeating ideas clearly helps both the speaker and the listener. I also want to share a story about my friend Clara. She runs a small art studio. One of her students struggled to describe a painting in English. Clara encouraged the student to use simple sentences. She said things like, "I used blue for the sky. The tree is tall." The student practiced again and again. Slowly, confidence grew. Clara said something very important. You don't need fancy words. Expressing yourself is what matters. This lesson is powerful for all English learners. Confidence does not come from difficult vocabulary. Confidence comes from sharing ideas clearly and honestly. One afternoon, while I was jogging, I met a young man named David. He was speaking English phrases aloud. He was talking to himself as part of his daily routine. I became curious and asked him why he did this. David smiled and said, "I want to speak confidently when I travel abroad." So we stopped for a few minutes. We practiced together. We took turns asking simple questions and answering them. We spoke slowly and clearly. That day, I learned something important. Speaking English every day, even alone, is very powerful. Real speaking practice is better than only memorizing words. Using English daily builds fluency and confidence. Another story comes from my friend Henry. He works at a small post office. One day, a woman came in feeling stressed. She wanted to send a package to another country. Henry did not rush her. He explained each step calmly in English. He checked again and again to make sure she understood. When she left, she was smiling and relaxed. Henry later told me, "When you help someone understand, both people feel confident." That moment reminded me that teaching English to others also strengthens your own learning and communication skills. I also want to share a story about my friend Laura. She volunteers at a local animal shelter. She often explains care instructions to visitors in English. One day, a child asked her, "How do I feed the rabbit?" Laura showed the child gently. She repeated the instructions slowly. She used simple words. The child followed the steps and did it correctly. Laura smiled and said, "Teaching small details helps people learn better." That story reminded me that clear explanations and good examples make English easier to understand. Another memorable moment happened at a local bakery. I met a man named Samuel. He was learning English while working there. At first, he struggled to greet customers politely. He felt nervous, but his manager encouraged him. The manager asked him to practice simple phrases like, "Good morning," and "Would you like some coffee?" Samuel practiced these phrases every day. Slowly, he became more confident. Customers noticed his friendly attitude. They smiled back at him. That experience reminded me that repeated practice in daily life is one of the fastest ways to become fluent in English. A few days later, I visited a small community garden. My friend Alice was there. She was helping children plant vegetables. She spoke slowly and clearly in English. She showed each step with her hands. One child asked, "What is this plant?" Alice picked up the leaves and showed them. She explained the name carefully. The child repeated the word slowly. Alice smiled and said, "Every question is a chance to learn." That day, I realized something important. Asking questions and answering them actively is very important for mastering English. Another story comes from my friend Tom. He works as a mechanic. One day, a customer was confused about car parts in English. Tom did not use long explanations. Instead, he pointed to each part. He said the word again and again. The customer understood and learned new vocabulary. Tom later said, "Patience and demonstration work better than long explanations." That reminded me that combining words with actions helps English learners understand faster. A few weeks later, I met a young woman named Emma at a library. She was working on a school project. She needed to summarize an English article, but she felt confused. I suggested something simple. I told her to break the article into small paragraphs. Then I told her to explain each part in her own words. She followed the steps carefully. Slowly, the task became easier. She finished her summary successfully. Emma smiled and said, "Breaking it into small parts makes it easier to understand." That reminded me that simplifying difficult English is a very effective learning strategy. I also want to share one more story. My friend Jack runs a small music store. One day, he was helping a tourist. The tourist wanted to understand different musical instruments. Jack explained each instrument in simple English. He talked about the sound. He talked about how people use it. The tourist listened carefully. He tried repeating the English words. Both of them laughed and enjoyed the moment. Jack later said, "Explaining things in simple English makes learning fun." That story reminded me of something important. Teaching through demonstration, repetition, and simple language helps both the speaker and the listener grow together.